Wrestle Machine here. Brock vs. Kane breakdown, Cade and Luna death updates and more. Resistance is futile. Wrestling is awesome. Like, comment, subscribe. October 20, 2010 Observer Newsletter, Cade and Luna death updates, Brock vs. Kane breakdown, business notes. By Observer staff. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228 ISSN 10839593 October 20, 2010. TNA Bound for Glory pay-per-view poll results. Thumbs up 77, 47.5%. Thumbs down 56, 34.6%. In the middle 29, 17.9%. Best match poll. Sabine and Shelley vs. Generation Me 78 votes. Hardy vs. Anderson vs. Angle 45 votes. Worst match poll. Tara vs. Love vs. Sky vs. Rain 65 votes. Moore and Neal vs. Young and Jordan 28 votes. Nash and Pope and Sting vs. Joe and Jarrett 15 votes. Strikeforce poll results. Thumbs up 59, 84.3%. Thumbs down 4, 05, 7%. In the middle 7, 10.0%. Best match poll. Nick Diaz vs. KJ Noons 41 votes. Josh Thompson vs. JZ Cavalcante 26 votes. Worst match poll. Tyron Woodley vs. Andre Galvao 37 votes. Based on emails, phone calls and fax messages to the Observer as of Tuesday, 10/12. Toxicology reports came back this week on deaths of two pro wrestlers from August, and as expected, both were ruled as drug-related. The death of Lance McNaught, 29, Lance Cade, on August 13, was ruled as due to a combination of ingesting multiple drugs combined with cardiomyopathy, or a weakened and enlarged heart by the Bexar County, Texas, Medical Examiner's Office. Cardiomyopathy is frequently associated with steroid users, and has been cited in the deaths of numerous wrestlers over the years. McNaught admitted in numerous interviews that he had used steroids on and off between 2002 and 2010. The cause of death was ruled as a mixed drug intoxication that complicated existing cardiomyopathy of the heart, a similar death to that of Curt Hennig, who used cocaine and died, but did not overdose on cocaine, but the cocaine that he used triggered his already damaged heart to go into cardiac arrest. Gertrude Herdnash, Luna Vachon, 48, who was found dead on August 27 by her mother, was ruled by the District 6 Medical Examiner's Office in Largo, Florida, as being due to an accidental overdose of the painkiller oxycodone, OxyContin, the same drug that was listed in the deaths of several wrestlers including Anthony Pitbull No. 2 Durante, Andrew Test Martin and Sherry Martel Russell, and a sedative, benzodiazepine, one of the drugs that killed Scott Bam Bam Bigelow. Benzodiazepine is used as a short-term treatment for alcohol dependence, seizures, anxiety, insomnia or panic attacks. In a New Haven Register article, Robert Zimmerman of WWE was quoted in regard to McNaught, that the company now has possession of an email McNaught wrote to another wrestler which stated that in March 2010, while he was under contract to WWE, that he had ordered 2 types of anabolic steroids and expected that he was going to fail his next drug test. McNaught was released in April, but did not fail a drug test. It is unclear whether he took a drug test in the last month he was under contract. What could be the most high-level heavyweight fight in MMA history takes place on October 23 in Anaheim, as Brock Lesnar defends the UFC heavyweight title against Cain Velasquez. While the fight should do strong numbers on pay-per-view, it doesn't have the name value cash as Lesnar vs. Randy Couture had in 2008, nor really the kind of feeling that the Fedor Emelianenko vs. Mirko Cro Cop fight in Japan had in 2005. But these two are athletes of a different level. Today's Lesnar would undoubtedly be a better fighter than the version of 2 years ago that fought Couture. Today's Velasquez, because of his skill set, would destroy that Couture far more easily than that Lesnar did. It's pretty clear this Lesnar is in better condition than the Lesnar who fought Shane Carwin. And while there is a saying about learning from your losses, Lesnar likely learned a lot, both holes to shore up, and gained a certain level of confidence in his ability to take a punch, from his win. These are two men from similar backgrounds, Lesnar growing up and working on a farm in South Dakota, Velasquez working the fields as a kid in Arizona. Both started wrestling at a young age, and it was their success in that sport as high schoolers that got them into college. Both were known for being more athletic and far better conditioned than most college heavyweights. Both got into the sport at about the same time. Velasquez started training a few months earlier than Lesnar in 2006, coming to the American Kickboxing Academy in San Jose at the age of 23. Lesnar, who had considered doing MMA as early as 1999 while traveling in California, but was talked out of it by his college wrestling coaches, had more lucrative offers coming out of college. While wrestling got both recognition in college, both noted to me in the past about their senior years of college that they both knew it would be the end of the line. Velasquez was ready to move on, and it was a promise by Coach Tom Ortiz that if he finished up the season, he'd make sure to get him started on the right path in MMA, rather than try and take it to the Olympic level, where he'd have been a long shot. Lesnar was such a gifted athlete that, had he desired, he probably could have done very well in international competition. He would have been an underdog to make the 2000 Olympic team, but with learning the rule differences, his athletic gifts would have made him a serious candidate for the 2004 Games. But he mentioned to me that during his senior year, he also knew that it was going to be his final year in that sport. By the time the 2004 Olympics rolled around, Lesnar had not only become a superstar in pro wrestling, but had left WWE, fed up with the lifestyle and looking at the locker room full of guys in their late 30s stuck in a drug-infested treadmill. He looked at his future and didn't like what he saw. In other ways, the two couldn't be more different. Lesnar is a freakish athlete, a combination of power and speed that normally would be limited to top-flight NFL stars. As a fighter, he ushered in the era of the new breed of fighter, the true world-class athlete who was 280 pounds and had to cut weight to make 265. Velasquez was a small heavyweight, who made up for his lack of size by being more skilled and in better condition than almost all of his opponents. But in UFC, the key difference is marketability. Lesnar has a full understanding of the role of headlining PPVs. He doesn't like aspects of it, but understands what it is, why it is, and what he should be doing. He doesn't really like people, but he captivates people. Velasquez is shy, quiet, and not a strong personality. There is a reason on the Countdown specials, that you see his trainers, Javier Mendez, Bob Cook and Dave Camarillo doing so much talking. They realize they have to pick up the slack. From a UFC standpoint, as long as Lesnar is on top, it will be a golden era for the heavyweight division. But as we'll likely see with the lightweights, the business the title matches draw is based a lot more on who is champion than just being a championship match. With the realization that the title could change hands, there has been an attempt to try and find something about Velasquez that will make him memorable, hence all the television commercials pushing that he may become the first Mexican heavyweight to win a combat sports world championship, and his push to improve his Spanish, plus playing up that heritage on television and sending him to Miami to promote the fight on Univision. Velasquez was born in Salinas, California, to a migrant worker who to this day still works on the fields, Efren Velasquez, who grew up in Mexico and came across the border to try and provide for his family. Long before he signed with UFC or had any name in the sport, he had garnered a reputation in San Jose as the toughest guy in the gym, and a ridiculously quick learner. In 2006, before he had his first pro fight, it was talked that he was destined for major stardom in the sport. By 2007, after 2 pro fights, people started saying that in a few years' time, he would be the one to stop Fedor Emelianenko. Lesnar came to UFC after just 1 fight, largely because they knew he could draw on pay-per-view, but he ended up becoming far bigger than even the most optimistic predictions would have been. Velasquez was supposed to gain experience for a few years in smaller shows before going to UFC. But his handlers got frustrated. As his reputation grew, it was impossible for him to get fights. He went all through 2007 with one fighter after another pulling out of bouts, some early, others at the last minute, when hearing about his reputation. With his going more than a year without fighting, including an attempted run on the Strikeforce shows in San Jose but he could never get an opponent, they decided to send him to UFC, where at least they should be able to get him foes. He debuted 2 months after Lesnar in UFC, but to far less fanfare. He destroyed Brad Morris in an undercard fight on the Montreal debut show, while Lesnar tapped to a knee bar against Frank Mir in his debut. There are similarities between this fight and Couture vs. Lesnar 2 years ago. That fight was skill versus size. Nearly everyone within the MMA world was sure Couture would win. The general public, seeing the size difference, for the most part believed otherwise. And they were correct. It's the same situation here. Talking with fighters, while there are some who will take Lesnar, they are in the minority. But in the marketing of the fight, the second toughest part of the sell, behind the fact Velasquez doesn't naturally possess the charisma, and pushing the Mexican angle so hard to try and give him something, is to make the public believe Velasquez can win. With Shane Carwin, you had someone of similar size as Lesnar, and with even better knockout ability, both easy sells. With Velasquez, it's conditioning, which isn't a sell, and while he has been as dominant a fighter in his actual fights as anyone in UFC history. But the finishes people have seen have not been spectacular. There's nothing he has done that has convinced people he's as good as people who train with him say he is. But on the flip side, he has not just won every round he's ever fought, but dominated every minute he's been in the cage with every opponent. He's had 3 moments in his career where he wasn't in control, after 3 solid punches landed in a fight with Cheick Kongo, and in all 3 cases, after getting hit hard and rocked, it was seconds later that Kongo was on his back and dominated for the rest of the round. Lesnar, who has fought a higher class of competition, lost to Mir, struggled at times with Couture, had the same split second of seeing stars and quickly recovering and scoring the takedown that Velasquez had 3 times with Kongo, but in his case it was once with Mir in the second fight. But in his most recent fight with Carwin, he was getting his ass kicked for several minutes. He didn't show much defensive skill, but he proved that he could take punch after punch from one of the hardest hitters in the sport, and come back. Velasquez has never been tested when it comes to that level of adversity. But he's never been in adversity for more than a few seconds. In charting out the fight, we know both men can take a good punch. But 4-ounce gloves and powerful heavyweights will test anyone's chin. Velasquez is far superior as a stand-up fighter, with all kinds of weapons. Lesnar's stand-up is rudimentary, but he has more power in his strikes. He can knock Velasquez out, but in a long stand-up battle, if he doesn't get the knockout, it's going to be a bad night for him. Based on reputation, the conditioning edge goes to Velasquez. But there are several factors that don't make that as cut and dried as you think. First, Velasquez will be pushing a guy who will be about 270 pounds, while Lesnar will be pushing on a guy about 245. Plus, Lesnar has been at so many big events, there is an experience there. Velasquez has been in one main event in his career, and has never been under anywhere close to the pressure he's under these last few weeks. Nerves can sap the best of conditioning. Lesnar has size, explosiveness and a straight-ahead speed advantage. Velasquez has better movement, more actual wrestling skill and a far superior stand-up game as far as the technical aspects go. Velasquez has finished 7 of his 8 opponents, all by stoppages from punches, and all by the middle of the second round. Yet he has a reputation for not hitting hard, although he lands with quickness and volume. And while Velasquez is more skilled as a wrestler, Lesnar was the better college wrestler of the two. But Velasquez has never stopped training, and this version is likely a better wrestler than the one in the 2006 NCAA tournament. Lesnar was 7 years out of competition before debuting in this sport. The fight is unlikely to end by submission. It likely would only end that way if one of the other gets tired. Either could knock the other out, but it's a distinct possibility this will be a long fight. On paper, that favors Velasquez. And there's questions about the wrestling game, both the first round that favors Lesnar, and the 5th round wrestling that may go the other way. And there is the psychological situation. What if Velasquez takes Lesnar down, beating him at the one aspect of the game where on paper he has an edge? What if Lesnar takes Velasquez down and can land punches from the top? Velasquez's ground defense is untested. Lesnar's is tested, but isn't very good. And there's age. Lesnar is 33, and while in great shape, all those beatings in the pro wrestling ring do add up as far as physical wear and tear goes. Velasquez is 28. In looking at the two men's fights in UFC, this is what we can learn. Velasquez. April 19, 2008, defeated Brad Morris via TKO 210, bad ref and late stoppage. Morris took a bad beating here in a slaughter that looked scary. Complete destruction of a journeyman, learned nothing other than why so many fighters were scared of him. July 19, 2008, defeated Jake O'Brien via TKO 202, beat a Division I heavyweight and walked through amusing wrestling like it was nothing. February 7, 2009, defeated Denis Stojnik via stoppage 234 second round, had trouble with Stojnik's size and his ability to take punishment, but still put him away in the second round and was never on defense. The stoppage wasn't impressive looking. June 13, 2009, defeated Cheick Kongo via decision after 3 rounds. We learned he can be hit, but he recovers quickly from it. We also learned that while he can land with volume after taking people down, largely at will, he didn't finish and Kongo was never really in danger of being stopped. October 24, 2009, defeated Ben Rothwell, 58 second round. Rothwell was much bigger, probably 6'5" and 280 in the cage, and Velasquez ragdolled him physically. But Rothwell is hardly the wrestler Lesnar is. Also a badly timed stoppage, although Rothwell was getting pummeled from the start, but he was not hurt badly when it was stopped. February 21, 2010, defeated Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira 2-20, very comfortable standing and trading. Many thought he would not do well standing with Nogueira, but he finished a guy who has only been finished twice in his career. At the same time, this may not be the same Nogueira who was impossible to finish. Lesnar. February 2, 2008, lost to Frank Mir 130 knee bar. We learned he can hit hard, he's ridiculously quick for his size, and can use his wrestling in the sport. But when facing a man with more experience, made a rookie mistake. August 9, 2008, defeated Heath Herring via decision after 3 rounds. We learned he can go 3 rounds, but it is a lot easier going 3 rounds in a rough wrestling match against someone with weak takedown defense. Also, from his first punch, showed he hits really hard. But he also never worked to try and finish. November 15, 2008, defeated Randy Couture to win the heavyweight title 307 second round. We learned he can beat a great fighter, can win a competitive fight, and has knockout power. But still uncomfortable standing, and could not walk through Couture with wrestling. He struggled for takedowns and was nearly taken down, against a 45-year-old man who was 60 pounds lighter. July 11, 2009, defeated Frank Mir via stoppage 148 second round, fought a smart, safe fight, taking Mir down and holding him there. By the second round, Mir's defense on his back wasn't there and Lesnar smashed his face in to get the stoppage. Understood his strengths and weaknesses, never veering from the game plan. July 30, 2010, defeated Shane Carwin via head and arm submission 219 second round, proved he can take a hard punch, but isn't comfortable standing, and while he can take a beating on the ground he got his ass handed to him for 3 o'clock until Carwin gassed. He also couldn't, until Carwin gassed, take down a wrestler who was both older and not as good as Velasquez. Comparing wrestling careers. High school. Lesnar, 122-37 record at Webster High in Webster, South Dakota, 3rd in the state as a junior, 1995, 3rd in the state as a senior, 1996. Velasquez, 110-10 record at Kofa High in Yuma, Arizona, state champion as a junior, 2000, and senior, 2001. Junior college. Lesnar, Bismarck, ND, junior college, 23-5 as a freshman, 1997, 5th place at nationals, 33-0 as a sophomore, 1998, NJCA champion. Velasquez, Iowa Central Community College, competed only as a freshman, 2003, winning the NJCA championship. Division I. Lesnar, University of Minnesota, 24-2 as a junior, 1999, Big Ten Conference champion, 2nd place in the NCAA tournament, 31-1 as a senior, 2000, Big Ten Conference champion, NCAA champion. Velasquez, Arizona State University 14-5 as a sophomore, 2004, 36-5 as a junior, 2005, Pac-10 Conference champion, Pac-10 Wrestler of the Year, 5th place NCAA tournament, 37-5 as a senior, 2006, Pac-10 champion, 4th place NCAA tournament. Notes: in running down the summer, when it comes to WWE, we've got more down than up, but with ticket price increases, house show gate revenue per event did increase over last year in all 3 months. The price increase on pay-per-view was not enough to offset the decline in buys, as June was down significantly, even though we are comparing the average instead of total revenue of a 2-show month, which should be harder to draw in, than a 1-show month. With TNA, things don't look as bad. However, for a company that's main priority is television ratings, and ratings are still down even with far more star power, it's still not a positive. House show business in June was about the same. July was a huge increase. While most of the increase from the Brooklyn Cyclones Stadium show, even throwing that out, numbers were up. August numbers were down. However, whether those increases are enough for the higher payroll is a different question. The good news is that on a monthly basis, TNA ratings increased each month, while that was not the case for WWE. It also should be noted that TNA's merchandise business at the house shows is way up, so house shows are far more successful than a year ago. On the pay-per-view front, for WWE, in actual revenue including both the house show gates and the pay-per-view revenue, the 2009 total for the 3 months was $19.98 million and the 2010 total was $14.13 million, or a drop of 29.3%. Although a lot of that drop is because they did 3 pay-per-view shows this summer as compared with 4 in 2009. SummerSlam was more profitable than last year even with the decline in orders, because of the price increase. However, the June and July shows were way down. For TNA, it appears pay-per-view was up largely due to Hardcore Justice and the ECW theme, even though the two prior shows appear to have done less than the prior year. An updated viewers chart for the major shows this year and as compared with last year. Since the number of homes that get cable and homes that could view SmackDown all increased a little year over year, there should be slight increases in every show, but instead all 4 shows are down. We had a chance to catch up with Dave Bautista at the Strikeforce show regarding what he's up to in his future. Bautista was there both as support for Nick Diaz, since both are part of the Cesar Gracie camp, and also to negotiate with Strikeforce for a potential match or matches. Promoter Scott Coker has been interested in Bautista vs Bobby Lashley for a pay-per-view or CBS show, although right now the company has no firm date on when, or even if they'll be on CBS in 2012. Talks are not dead and they are at the top level, nor is any deal on the table right now, and the jury is very much out on whether they can be successful on pay-per-view. If they reach a deal with CBS, it would likely be a more encompassing deal and would probably result in promoting a pay-per-view show next year. Both Strikeforce and Bautista noted that they have not reached a deal, and Bautista indicated it's a financial issue. Bautista noted he'd like to get some fights in as quickly as possible, given his age. He turns 42 in January. He also said that as far as top-tier pro wrestlers going into MMA, while they are entirely different games, he was pushing the idea to everyone that the one thing the top tier of pro wrestlers have is physical durability. Most feel it's a long shot he'll ever fight, because of both his age and because of the risk he would be taking with his name. The other reason is that the amount of money it would likely take to get him would be more than any fighter other than Fedor Emelianenko has ever cost the company, and if CBS was willing to put it up, he probably would deliver curiosity ratings. On pay-per-view, there are so many variables and at the end of the day it would come down to promotion. Bautista is a bigger pro star and is coming right off WWE television as opposed to being gone for 4 years like Brock Lesnar was when he started, and Lesnar's debut was a pay-per-view bonanza for UFC. But this isn't UFC. Lesnar's actual pay-per-view debut was with K1 and it wasn't promoted well and garnered no interest, so at the end of the day it's in the promotion of the event. UFC at this point wouldn't take him sight unseen, but there is a chance his debut would do business in UFC. But again, it's an angle, and when Lesnar did it, it was a different deal, largely because Lesnar did have an NCAA title under his belt and there was a real school of thought he could do well in the sport. With Bautista, there is no background and there's the age issue. Bill Goldberg was the same way a few years back, and flirted with the idea of fighting, but felt he'd be risking too much. Lots of promoters talked with him but at the end of the day nobody could likely afford what he wanted, and he's long since put that idea out of his head. It's unclear what the effect would be for a top US pro wrestling superstar if they did well, or did poorly in MMA, regarding returning as a pro wrestler. Logic would say it would have no effect, being that everyone understands they are completely different businesses. But fan and promoter reaction isn't always logical. When Bautista got the worst of a short altercation with Booker T years back, it took months before the creative team could convince Vince McMahon to let him have a run with the world title, as Vince didn't like the idea of having a world champion who had gotten the worst of it in a street fight. Chris Jericho has noted that he believes, whether rightly or wrongly, that he got a measure of respect from key people in the company as it regarded being a top guy because he was on top when a 30 seconds long skirmish with Goldberg took place. In Japan, Yuji Nagata years ago was hurt badly as a star because he was knocked out quickly in an MMA match by Mirko Cro Cop. Keep in mind this was before Cro Cop was an MMA star, it was his third MMA fight, the first at the time considered a fluke cut win on Kazuyuki Fujita, the second a horrible nothing-happening draw with Nobuhiko Takada, and Nagata was an amateur wrestling champion years earlier, but a total beginner as a fighter. On the other hand, Yoshihiro Takayama became a far bigger pro wrestling star due to losing MMA fights, but losing in an exciting manner. Kazuyuki Fujita had a mixed bag record as an MMA fighter but when he did pro wrestling, was a much bigger star because of it, as was Tadao Yasuda, although the making of both of those men IWGP champion was probably a stretch. In the US, while nothing is proven, my feeling is Bobby Lashley's loss would hurt him going into pro wrestling. Dan Severn, when he lost to Mark Coleman in 1997, had some independent pro wrestling promoters cancel bookings on him. But Japan and US indies in the 90s are totally different situations. Again in theory, a loss in MMA shouldn't have any effect on a pro wrestling career, but I believe it has with Lashley, and it would have badly hurt Goldberg, and it at best would be a risk to Bautista. Bautista looks considerably smaller than from his pro wrestling days, not that he's small by any means, as he's probably still 260 pounds. He has sort of softened his stance regarding pro wrestling from a few months ago. He said he doesn't want to say anything bad right now about pro wrestling, and that he loved working for Vince McMahon and being in WWE, but hated the schedule and physical toll the business was taking on him. He joked about how he's doing fight training, including stand-up training, and joked about how actual combat training is so much easier on him physically than pro wrestling. He said he loves the training he's doing, but when asked if he wished he had started when he was younger, he was really careful not to say anything similar to what Dwayne Johnson said in the recent Ariel Helvani interview. He said that answering that question with a yes response could be taken as crapping on his pro wrestling career, but he's very proud of his pro wrestling career and what he accomplished. He said he was lucky, being handpicked for stardom by Triple H and Ric Flair, who he said were the best mentors anyone could ever have, but felt they also saw he had the motivation to make it. He said a big problem in WWE right now is that so many of the wrestlers don't have the drive to be main eventers. My opinion is that they have the drive, but at some point it gets beaten out of them, and are happy without the pressure on them, being in the middle because they still make good money. There were rumors earlier in the week that he had given up on MMA and was going to return to WWE, but he said that wasn't the case. He said that he would not close the door to going back at some point, but right now he's focusing on his acting career. He noted that he's doing a movie in a few weeks, the lead in a small-budget, $5 million, film, but said he's in talks for a role in a major movie that would be a huge boon to his career, which if it happens, would start filming around Christmas. He said he can't release the info until it's a done deal. Strikeforce and Bautista are not close on contract terms after 4 meetings trying to make a deal, but they are still talking. Bautista did not get brought up at the press conference or put on the podium to take questions, but Strikeforce officials did work with him on getting interviews done. Coker's idea was to put together a pay-per-view match with Bobby Lashley and working out a deal from there. Bautista noted that if he fights it would come down to the money, as he's looking for a multi-fight deal. He felt the earliest he could fight would be around March, because he wants a full training camp after finishing the second of his 2 upcoming movies. By his own admission, he turns 42 in January and recognized if he was going to do something, it has to be quick. He said he wants 3 fights, a tune-up first fight, a second fight against someone like Lashley, and if he wins that, a third fight against an even bigger name on pay-per-view. He was telling reporters he thinks he could beat Lashley. "We're very similar athletes," he told MMAJunkie.com. "I think that I'll be a much better stand-up fighter, and I think with Caesar's guidance, I dominate him on the ground. I think I'll be a much more well-rounded fighter than Bobby." He said his goal is to put on exciting matches, either winning big or losing big. He said that TNA threw some very good offers his way, but that if he is going to do pro wrestling, it would be WWE. He also said it breaks his heart whenever he hears that Ric Flair is wrestling, just because of the great send-off he had at WrestleMania and at Raw. He said Flair loves performing before the fans, and people try and talk him out of doing things that will hurt him, but noted all the times Flair took backdrops on the floor when he was in his 50s in WWE. But he said he never saw any signs of Flair hurting or being injured, no matter how much punishment he took. CMLL. Emilio Charles Jr. nearly died this past week after being bit by a reckless spider in Veracruz. By the time Charles Jr., 54, who still wrestles on occasion, had returned home to Mexico City from the show, he had to be rushed to La Raza Hospital, the best infectious disease hospital in the country. He was in a life-and-death battle, including needing surgery on his upper chest to remove the sphingomyelina st poison. He came to Arena Mexico this past week after getting out of the hospital and was totally unrecognizable. I mean, the guy looked like a walking corpse. The 10/8 show at Arena Mexico drew 6,000 fans, going head-to-head with WWE coming to town, and a week before a big show. They were down to only the hardcores because Místico, who the hardcores hate, was so heavily booed. Místico and Mascara Dorada and La Sombra beat Atlantis and Ultimo Guerrero and Dragon Rojo Jr. in a 3-fall main event that at less than 10 o'clock of wrestling, the second straight week they've done a short main event. Místico won clean over Guerrero in the third fall with La Mística. Mr. Niebla and Negro Casas and Felino beat Invaders Charlie Manson and Psicosis and Taichi via DQ when Olympico interfered in the second fall after Felino made Psicosis submit to a reverse figure 4 in the first fall. At the 10/10 show at Arena Coliseo, Atlantis and Ultimo Guerrero and Dragon Rojo Jr. won a non-title match over CMLL Trios champions La Mascara and La Sombra and Mascara Dorada, which sets up a title match, which takes place on October 17. The 10/17 show also features the finals of the Arena Coliseo Tag Team Title Tournament. Delta and Diamante, who won the 10/10 tournament, face Angel de Oro and Angel de Plata, who won on October 3 in a hair versus hair match with women Luna Magica versus Princesa Blanca. The show was originally to take place at Arena Coliseo, but they decided instead to make as one of those $2 ticket price shows and move it to Arena Mexico, which makes no sense given the Arena Coliseo Tag Team Title Tournament finals are on the show. The 10/5 Arena Mexico show was another one with the low ticket prices. The card, headlined by Volador Jr. losing the Mexican light heavyweight title to La Mascara, drew 10,500 fans. A correction from last week is that New Japan prelim wrestler Nobuo Yoshihashi is still in Mexico, even though it had been reported he was returning to Japan. Shocker, who had no-show dates for a few weeks, returned on the 10/12 Arena Mexico show. Sagrado, Valiente, Hefesto and Polvoro were sent this week to Amsterdam, the Netherlands, where they are having a Lucha Libre exhibit. AAA. Perro Aguayo Jr. said that he contacted both Místico and Ultimo Guerrero about joining his promotion and showing up at the Heroes Immortales show in the roles that the Vipers ended up in when nobody jumped. Dorian Roldan had said nobody from AAA had talked to Místico, which is best would be hard to believe. Aguayo Jr. said both wanted too much money. Místico talked with people with AAA and with Aguayo Jr. and told both that when he complained to Paco Alonso about how he was being booked, that Alonso told him that he had 3 previous super drawing cards over the past 20 years, Santo, Vampiro, and Kanan, and he catered to all of them and they still left him. And he survived every one of them leaving and basically said the door is wide open if he wanted to leave. Místico then told Super Luchas that he never talked to anyone in AAA or Perros del Mal. In fact, he talked to people with both groups and said the same thing to both about his meeting with Alonso. He said he was never going to go to the Heroes Immortales show, and that people are grandstanding and making up stories. He said he could work for anyone if the money is right. That was the key, as he's still making big money in CMLL, although likely nowhere close to what he was making 2 years ago when he was on fire. But he's got no plans to leave CMLL. He said regarding fans booing him every Friday night, he's very much getting the Cena treatment, in the sense when he works house shows he's super popular everywhere, but at the TV tapings, particularly when the crowds are down, which means it's only the hardcores, he's getting booed like crazy. He doesn't care, because as long as they pay to see him then he's doing his job. Ratings for the weekend saw SmackDown at 9.1, CMLL at 3.1, AAA at 3.4, very low compared to usual, and Raw at 9.6. Between the ages of 4 to 18, SmackDown and the Spanish-language translation of The Simpsons are the 2 most popular shows on TV Azteca 7. AAA is making a big deal out of the fact that El Hijo del Santo is trying to get the word caballo trademarked, which is the name of his finishing hold, and his father's finishing hold, which is known in the US as the camel clutch since the Sheik and Iron Sheik and other Arabian wrestlers used to use it. It is believed the move was invented by Gory Guerrero, who was El Santo's tag team partner in the 50s. What is notable is Santo is getting it trademarked in the category of dance/choreography, and Santo has been publicly stating the reason he doesn't want to work for AAA is that they are too much entertainment and are not true wrestling. They had a big media day on October 7 for the release of the video game in Mexico City. Tons of media were there interviewing Octagon, Cibernetico, Dr. Wagner Jr., Kanan, El Hijo, Sexy Star and others. Nicho and Zorro are headed for a hair match in Ciudad Juarez, which would be on an indie show. Nicho pinned Zorro on October 3 and challenged him to a hair match afterwards. The match is set for 10:30. That tells you a lot about the state of the promotion right now when 2 of its star regulars are doing a hair program on an indie show rather than on their own TV. Silver Kane, wearing his mask, was shown in newspapers shaking hands with Felipe Calderón, the president of Mexico. It's funny thinking about how that could never happen in public, a masked guy shaking hands with the president. When Jimmy Carter was inaugurated, Mr. Wrestling 2 was personally invited, but he wasn't allowed to come while wearing his mask, so didn't come. I also remember once being in a hotel where Mil Mascaras was walking around with his mask and security tried to get him to take it off, and this was Mil Mascaras, so there was no way. The Perros del Mal show on November 6 in Tijuana includes Jackie Gata Haas in a prelim, plus Conan and Halloween and Damien 666 vs Super Crazy and Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, and Booker T and Dr. Wagner Jr. and Macias vs. Pero Aguayo Jr. and Big Daddy V and Hernandez. Melissa Anderson, formerly Raisha Saeed, probably as cheerleader Melissa, as well as Mercedes Martinez, have been booked for future AAA TV tapings. Anderson is replacing Christina Vanieri, who quit the promotion. Next TV is 1018 in Tehuacan with Heavy Metal and Macias and La Parka vs. Hernandez and L.A. Park and Zorro, plus The Vipers, Dark Cuervo and Dark Espiritu and Dark Oz, starting a new program with Los Perros del Mal, Halloween and Damien 666 and Super Crazy. Pero Jr. is only being used on major shows, if he's even going to be used much at all going forward. After that is a 1031 show in Nezahua's Wagner Jr. and Macias and Parka vs. Aguayo Jr. and Park and Zorro, plus Los Vipers vs. Chessman and Hernandez. Mercedes Martinez is scheduled to debut as the latest foreign heel. Park is working a soccer stadium show on October 16 in Nuevo Laredo, which has quite the payroll with El Hijo del Santo and Mil Mascaras and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. vs. Park and Connect and El Hijo del Solitario. Dragon Gate. Austin Aries, who is basically done with Ring of Honor, will be used as a regular and starts with the 1029 show in Fall River, Massachusetts. The impression is he would also tour Japan. Aries had issues with management and Ring of Honor decided to make him one of the cutbacks they are making for financial reasons. The 10/10th show in Fukuoka drew a sellout 2,350 fans headlined by Masato Yoshino keeping the Open the Dream Gate title, pinning Ryo Saito in 27:49. Chima vs. Shingo has been added to the 10:30 pay-per-view taping in Rahway, New Jersey. Added to the 10:29 IP show is Jimmy Jacobs vs. Jon Moxley in an I Quit match. All Japan. Bad news as the Open of the new tour on October 10 at Korakuen Hall drew only 700 fans, with the main event of Keiji Muto and Masakatsu Funaki over Kaz Hayashi and Sawama in 24:29 when Muto beat Hayashi with the figure 4 leglock. Charlie Haas made his debut on the undercard, teaming with Big Daddy Voodoo and Taru, beating Akebono and Taiokia and Minoru Suzuki. The big angle on the show was Masayuki Kono turning heel and joining the Voodoo Murderers, and changing his name from this point to just Kono. The idea is for Kono and Kenzo to be a top Japanese heel tag team and also for Kono to work on top against Sawama as the two focused Japanese stars. Muto, who came back way early from knee surgery, is only working a few dates as he worked opening night as a headliner and hasn't worked since. They also debuted the 5th Tiger Mask on the 10/11 show in Gifu. The newest person in the lineage, trained and endorsed by Satoru Sayama, is a combination bodybuilder and high flyer. He teamed with Minoru Suzuki in his debut match, beating Hiroshi Yamato and Osamu Nishimura. He only worked that date and hasn't worked the rest of the tour. The 34th annual Real World Tag League tournament takes place from 11/20 to 12/7, with the finals in Sendai. Other Japan notes. North Korea has released an Antonio Inoki postage stamp. Inoki is well known in the country because Rikidozan is a national hero, and he was promoted as Rikidozan's protege, and his 1995 match with Ric Flair drew the largest crowd ever for a pro wrestling event, 170,000 fans, reported as 190,000. Most of that was government-ordered attendance and free tickets, so it's not the same as the other historical big crowds. Nozawa promoted an independent show at Korakuen Hall on October 8, drawing 900 fans, built around bringing back Mil Mascaras and Abdullah the Butcher, and as the 15th anniversary of his 1995 pro debut. I was told Mascaras, now 71, stole the show. Mascaras was a hero to kids in Japan in the 70s and early 80s on network prime time with the cool masks and cool moves that nobody else did. Nozawa was from the generation so booked his team match teaming with Mascaras and Vampiro, who was super over in Mexico when Nozawa worked there, to beat Abdullah and Chima and Arcangel de la Muerte, a veteran that the Japanese have a lot of respect for. Nozawa got to play the Dos Caras role and doing double team moves with Mascaras, like the double flying cross chops. Nozawa booked himself to get the pin. After the match, he said he would promote another show in 3 years for his 18th pro anniversary. The other gimmick he did was remake the big main event feud of his childhood, of Bruiser Brody and Stan Hansen vs. Jumbo Tsuruta and Genichiro Tenryu. Minoru Suzuki dressed up and played Brody, as Bruiser Minode. Yoshihiro Takayama played Hansen as Taken Hansen, while Kiko Taro played Tsuruta as Jumbo Kiku. Of course, Takayama as Hansen used the lariat to pin Kiko Taro. They also had a 15-man Royal Rumble won by DDT President Sunshiro Takagi. Among those in were Tatsuhito Takaiwa as Black Tiger, El Samurai, former FMW star Ricky Fuji, Early MMA star Kazunari Murakami, Takamichi Noku, Minoru and current MMA star Minowa Man. They also honored Gran Hamada, who turned 60 on November 27. TNA's Ayako Hamada came into team with her feather in a 3-man and 1-woman on a team match. Vampiro noted how sad he was to see firsthand just how far wrestling interest in Japan had fallen. Mascaras did another show called the Mill Mascaras Festival on October 11 in Tokyo at the smaller Chinkiba building before 300 fans. This time Mascaras and Pantera and Genichiro Tenryu beat Yoshiaki Fujiwara and Nozawa and Archangel de la Muerte. That's got to be one of the oldest matches on record, with Mascaras, Tenryu, 60, and Fujiwara, 61. A promotion called Gladiator 2 ran for Ariake on October 9 using MMA star Minowa Man, who has done a few pro wrestling matches, and his gimmick as an MMA fighter is that he plays a pro wrestler, wearing the wrestling trunks, which US MMA fans refer to as the Red Speedos, playing to the crowd, and he's actually one of the most popular fighters in Japan despite a mediocre record. Minowa Man and Akebono beat Nozawa and Wakashoyo, a former sumo, when Minowa Man used a German suplex to pin Nozawa in the main event. Wataru Sakata's new Hustle promotion is said to be a poor man's version of the original. They ran at Shinjuku Face this past week, and they had to heavily paper to fill a 550-seat arena. The positive it was noted is that Sakata and wife Eiko Koike, a famous model, gave away most of the tickets to her friends, who are high-level models, so it was said to be the best-looking first few rows you'll ever see at a show. They have a fake Razor Ramon HG and a fake Monster C. Steve Corino was the original. The show did include Shiro Koshinaka, Shinjiro Otani and Monster J, Sonya Dutt, who was in Japan for the 01 Junior Heavyweight Tournament, which Ikuto Hidaka won on September 17, beating Habu from Okinawa Pro in the finals. Ikuto Hidaka, 38, is now engaged to singer Megumi Abiko, 28, so was described to me as a mid-level celebrity singer in Japan. Norihisa, Yoshihisa, Yamamoto, who Akira Maeda in the 90s tried to groom as his next big star, and later did a number of shoot matches with Rings and Pride as a heavyweight. He actually gave Rickson Gracie his toughest match in 1995, lasting about 2,400 hours, now 40, and is scheduled to return as a welterweight for a deep show on October 24. Yamamoto lost his last 6 fights and hasn't fought since 2007, including a 9-second loss to former pro wrestler Katsuyori Shibata. Rossy Ogawa, who worked for All Japan Women during the company's glory days, is resurfacing, starting a new women's group that he said will start in January. Here and there. Here's an update on Dwayne Johnson and his movie career. Faster is the movie being released next month, with Johnson and Billy Bob Thornton. I'm presuming that's the movie that UFC will be promoting the release of over the next few weeks. He is currently finishing up filming Fast and Furious 5, which is the movie with Vin Diesel we've written about, which is scheduled for a summer release. They are wrapping up filming in Atlanta right now. Then he goes right to his next project, Journey to The Mysterious Island, a 3D movie that's the sequel to Journey to the Center of the Earth 3D. They will be filming that in Hawaii and North Carolina with New Line Cinema. Johnson plays the boyfriend of Sean Anderson's mother. Anderson, played by Josh Hutcherson, was in the first movie. The two will be in search of Hutcherson's missing grandfather. Lionsgate has made a big for Take My Wife, a comedy that will star Johnson and Tyler Perry. In this movie, Perry plays a divorced man tired of paying alimony, so he decides to find his wife a new husband. He chooses Johnson, but of course, while he sets up Johnson with his wife, he ends up falling back in love with his wife. Johnson and ex-wife Dani Garcia are among the executive producers of the movie. Jushin Liger, 45, returns to the U.S. for shows on December 10 and 12/11 for Jersey All Pro Wrestling. He'll work the 13th anniversary show weekend on December 10 in Rahway, New Jersey at the Rec Center, on a show that also will include just out of rehab Eddie Hart. The 12/11 show will be a 4 p.m. show at the Arena in Philadelphia, as part of an afternoon-evening doubleheader at the Arena with CZW. Liger faces Mike Quackenbush on a show that will also include Hart, Jay Lethal, Charlie Haas and the Briscoes. Chris Nowinski will be one of 7 U.S. leaders sent overseas next year as recipients of the Eisenhower Fellowships. Nowinski will be sent to Belgium and Germany to share his work with leaders in European sports and medicine and to expand the network of research of brain injuries. John, Mr. Wrestling 2, Walker was finally released from the hospital and able to return home to Hawaii. For all the talk of MMA taking potential new star talent away from pro wrestling, another impact is on the U.S. team in international wrestling. At the World Wrestling Championships held over the 9/11 and 9/12 weekend in Moscow, the U.S. ended up with its worst performance of modern times, with nobody placing in freestyle or Greco-Roman, the first time this has happened in 35 years. The women's team took 2 medals, a silver by Russian-born Elaine Poroshkova at 139 pounds and a bronze by 19-year-old Tatiana Padilla at 121 pounds. Saori Yoshida, 27, the greatest woman wrestler of this era, won her 8th World Championship. She also has 2 Olympic gold medals, at 121 pounds. Kaori Icho of Japan won a gold at 139 pounds, and Kyoko Hamaguchi, 32, the daughter of pro wrestler and coach Animal Hamaguchi, who is a celebrity wrestler in Japan, got a bronze at 158 pounds. Hamaguchi had 2 Olympic bronze medals and is staying active until the 2012 Games in hopes of winning a gold, but her prime, when she was considered the best woman wrestler in the world, is long past. She has won 5 world titles, but the last came in 2003. An interesting trivia note is that on the All Japan Women's Pro Wrestling show at the Tokyo Dome in 1994, the biggest women's wrestling event of all time, that 2 women who wrestled on that show, Hamaguchi, who lost on that show to Doris Blind, and Anna Gomez of France, who lost on that show to Miyu Yamamoto, the sister of Kid Yamamoto and ex-wife of Enson Inoue, both 16 years later got bronze medals at the World Championships. Both of those matches were shoot matches on a 10.5-hour show that had several shoot matches on it. Several wrestlers who potentially could have made the U.S. team and been competitive at the world level, including Cole Conrad, King Mo, Daniel Cormier, and Ben Askren, are now concentrating on MMA. Sean Pascoe has been looking for investors for the WWP, which at this stage of the game sounds even less promising. For whatever this is worth, to people he's approaching, he's thrown the names Jerry Jarrett and David Crockett out as people who were with him on the business side. I don't know that they are, only that those names have been used in discussions with people who have money. Others who are affiliated in office positions with the group who have a direct line to Milton Wilpon, have been told by Wilpon that he is looking for funding for the project and he's talking confidently that he'll get it, but the credibility with virtually everyone in wrestling regarding it has been shot, and at this point few are taking this seriously. Tommy Gilbert, the father of Doug Gilbert and the late Eddie Gilbert, who was a star in the 70s in the Tennessee Territory, suffered a collapsed lung and a broken back falling off a ladder while working on his house in Lexington, Tennessee. The Jim Cornette official return to OVW was at the 9/8 tapings in Louisville. Even with the TV push as the start of the new season and big surprises including the announcement of the new matchmaker, they only drew 150 fans to the show. The TV show opened with Dean Hill calling out the locker room and first brought out Danny Davis. Davis just said that 2008 was the worst year of his life, he didn't handle things well and just went away. He said since he left, the inmates have been running the asylum, but said they did the best they could and if it wasn't for them, OVW would have had to have shut down. But he said he was back running the promotion. They did a deal where Kenny Bolin, heel manager/announcer, acted like Davis was the new matchmaker and said he'd be glad to become the assistant matchmaker, and then Davis said the new matchmaker would be Cornette. Cornette said they would be bringing back old favorites, top indie guys and national wrestling stars. Among those who also returned were Nick Dinsmore, under that name, Morris Green, who was briefly in WWE as Lamont and Bruce the Butler, Cliff Compton, Domino of Deuce and Domino fame. Dinsmore's match didn't get a lot of reaction. He was heavier and not as mobile as before, and seemed like he may have had a bad knee. He's been there with Danny Davis working on rebuilding the promotion, but the starting point was pretty low, as the shows were drawing less than 100 and they have no name talent to work with to change that. Daniel Pudare, who is one of the better self-promoters among MMA fighters, has gotten himself a lot of TMZ pub over the last week for a campaign to deal with bullies. He's gone on television and asked people who have been bullied in schools to send him emails and he'll take care of the situation. He was naturally flooded with emails, and said his goal isn't to beat up bullies, but to talk with them and talk them out of doing it. He's gotten a ton of media requests stemming from this, including MSNBC and TV stations throughout California. He said he'll start going to schools that he's gotten emails from after his tour with New Japan ends next month. Mike Enos, 47, who during the 90s worked for AWA, WWF and WCW, spent several days in jail on a contempt of court charge. He had been ordered to pay money owed by a plumbing company who sued him. Anthony Mateo, who has wrestled independently on and off for years as Hitman Tony Stetson in the Northeast, including in the early ECW days, received the Barrymore Award on October 4 in Philadelphia for excellence in theater work. Mateo won for Best Choreography/Movement in the well-reviewed pro wrestling play, The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity. He retired as a pro wrestler in 2002, but has been back working regularly for the TWA, which runs out of Voorhees, Pennsylvania for the past year. The next Cauliflower Alley banquet will be in Las Vegas April 18th to 20th, 2011. I don't know what my schedule will be like that month, but I'm planning on attending. Being honored will be Sergeant Slaughter, Mick Foley, Rick Martel, Honky Tonk Man, Harvey Whippleman, Tom Burke, Tommy, Doug, and Eddie Gilbert, Darling Dagmar, Awesome Kong, Rocking Robin Smith, Dan Crawford, and Alex Knight. The NWA announced its 2010 Hall of Fame class as Ed Schumann, an independent promoter in Chicago who had been with the new version of the organization, who passed away earlier this year, Buddy Rogers, a legend who was one of the 10 greatest drawing cards in pro wrestling history, Danny Hodge, who probably should be in any wrestling Hall of Fame, arguably the greatest college wrestler of all time who became the top star in pro wrestling in the McGuirk territory and was an international star as World Junior Heavyweight Champion in the 60s and early 70s, Dan Severn, the former UFC champion and MMA pioneer, who had a long run as NWA champion when it was an Indies title, Shinya Hashimoto, the late Japanese superstar who headlined numerous Tokyo Dome sellouts, Jack Briscoe, the 1965 NCAA champion who later became NWA champion 1973-75, who was one of the biggest stars of the 70s, who passed away earlier this year, Nick Gulas, who ran one of the biggest wrestling territories in the country from the 50s through the 70s, encompassing what later became both the Tennessee and Alabama territories, The Sheik, one of the great heel drawing cards of all time and also a promoter running the Michigan/Ohio territory in the 60s and 70s, and Gene and Al Anderson, the top heel tag team of the 70s in the Southeast, and Al Anderson was also a booker in Georgia, the Carolinas and WCW at different times. Jason Geiger, an MMA fighter with a 2-2 record, is back doing independent wrestling around Winnipeg under the name Donnie DiCaprio. He was a pro wrestler before getting into MMA. Former wrestler/powerlifter Nicholas Busick, Big Bully Busick, who wrestled from 1977 to 1992, with a 5-month run in WWF in 1991 where he came in with a push as a bully heel but the character flopped and was quickly gone and forgotten about, filed suit against his former employer, Mountaineer Casino in Chester, West Virginia. The casino claimed Busick was fired for business-related reasons, but he claimed he was fired because he discovered higher-ups were involved in theft and fraud. Attorney Patrick Cassidy said Busick claimed to have discovered that management at the Mountaineer Casino had given alcohol to an underage employee, that top executives took kickbacks, and a surprise audit at the casino's vault showed $169,000 missing and unaccounted for. Busick is asking for $1.12 million plus pay he would receive for running the fitness center at the casino. Attorneys for the casino claim the casino lost $11 million in 2007 and had to make layoffs, and Busick was one of 350 people in the last 2 years laid off because of the poor economy. The trial goes to court this week. Since that time, the casino has filed a countersuit, claiming Busick kept company documents and revealed business secrets, and gave some of the company fitness equipment to Steubenville High School without permission. 70s Southern wrestling star Jim Dalton, now a truck driver, was involved in an accident that he was lucky to walk away from. The semi-Dalton, James Boggers, was driving crashed into a tractor which burst into flames on August 30. Boggers and a passenger were trapped in the cab after the accident when the cab overturned and crashed on its side. He escaped with minor injuries when an officer who was nearby was able to get him out. Ring of Honor. Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, after the big reaction they got headlining the IPF, will return on December 9 and 12/10 for the next set of TV tapings in Louisville. The shows are called Ring of Honor, 2 nights only, at the 400-seat Davis Arena. Benjamin started his career in Louisville in 2000 as part of the Minnesota Stretching Crew tag team with Brock Lesnar, wrestling out of the old Davis Arena. Haas also spent time in OVW early in his career. They look to be building a 3-way program with the Briscoes and Kings of Wrestling. The Kings, Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli, are doing a show in Peru on November 6 as part of an 8-team one-night tag team tournament. It's being pushed as the first time an independent world championship team has ever worked in the country. TNA. Mick Foley was on Wrestling Observer Radio this past week talking about his book and a ton of issues in TNA. He figured he has very few good matches left, and it's possible the match with Flair may have been the last big one. He said if it was, he could live with that being his final big match. The reality was he was a guy who took pride in his ability to do almost anything without getting hurt, and now gets hurt too easily. He got hurt doing a referee gig a few weeks back, and was hurting so bad after this match that he had to cancel a book signing in Louisville the next day because he didn't think he could make it through the 2 flights. He noted that after 2000, he can't do a big retirement. He admitted trying to be a team player. When he first signed with TNA, the agreement was to do 3 pay-per-view matches per year and that would be the extent of the wrestling, but in trying to help the company, he ended up doing something like 17 matches and the problem was that was hard on his body and made the matches less special. He praised Vince Russo, noting he had an idea regarding an angle to sell his book and came to Russo with it, and Russo immediately came up with a better idea. Still, he recognized the issue of throwing so much out there on every show that nothing ends up being pushed to be something big or has huge impact. Jesse Neal got mainstream pub this past week as it's the 10th anniversary of the bombing of the USS Cole, that he was on and where his best friend, who had vowed to become a pro wrestler after they left the military together, was killed. Jesse Godderz of Big Brother fame signed a developmental deal this past week after his tryout match on October 12 against Stevie Richards. Godderz on the show was a bodybuilder who wanted to become a pro wrestler, and he's done limited indie dates over the past year. The company got what almost appeared to be a mention on the O'Reilly Factor on October 12. They were talking about the McMahon Senate race and Alan Combs, the resident liberal on the station, started chanting, "TNA over the over." If you're a wrestling fan, you may have thought he was talking about competition, but he explained, saying, "T&A, T&A, skimpy clothing, she's the World Wrestling Federation." UFC/WEC. The newest issue of Esquire magazine did a poll surveying 20-year-olds and 50-year-old men. The ages were chosen because of all the ages in the US there are more 50-year-olds men than any other age, and in second place is 20-year-olds. I guess that means there was a lot of sex in the US in 1959, 1960 and 1989, 1990. When listing the favorite spectator sports, Ultimate Fighting, not MMA, was named by 7% of 50-year-old men as their favorite sport, making it was number 4 behind football, baseball and basketball. However, by 20-year-olds, it was number 2, behind only football, being named as their favorite sport by 26% of Americans. Granted, this is one of those surveys where you read the results and immediately come to the conclusion it's bullshit because there is no way UFC is more popular than the NBA or Major League Baseball even among 20-year-olds, and that the idea that 26% of 20-year-olds in the US would really think it's their most popular sport since TV ratings in the demo say otherwise. While UFC touts its success in the male 18 to 34 age group, and Ultimate Fighter does really well in that group, still, even in that demo it is slightly below Raw, but is now way ahead of SmackDown. The real popularity of UFC on television kicks in more around the age of 25 than 18. But no way in any age group UFC is more popular than baseball. The latest estimate of UFC 119 is 295,000 buys, which is not bad considering it had a Frank Mir vs Mirko Cro Cop main event. The strongest pay-per-view markets per capita look to have been Calgary, Vancouver, Toronto, Indianapolis, where the event took place, Honolulu, Las Vegas, Louisville, Sacramento, Seattle, Dallas, Los Angeles, Chicago, Halifax, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. Right now there are about 9,000 tickets sold for UFC 121 in Anaheim, in an arena that holds about 14,000. The cheapest tickets available at the box office are $300 tickets, so basically all the upper deck is sold but the middle and floor have tons of unsold tickets. However, which is why there has been talk for a few weeks of Randy Couture's career being over, stemming from a comment his lawyer, Sam Spira, made when he said Couture fighting again was a toss-up. Couture said he's been working on getting a new acting gig but hasn't been successful. Given his age, you can see more of a future in acting than fighting, although Couture is by no means an accomplished actor. Right now there is no future Couture fight on the schedule, and it's not known if he's going to take a fight. Chuck Liddell, who filed suit against MMA Authentics in June, saying they violated his agreement with the company by marketing Liddell merchandise that he didn't approve, filed papers this past week listing $350,000 as the amount he was suing over. UFC filed suit on October 9 in U.S. District Court in Las Vegas against Daniel Wallace of Chelsea, West Sussex, UK, who provided an internet stream for UFC 119. The lawsuit said Wallace's website has carried streaming of several UFC events. The lawsuit accuses him of copyright infringement and seeks a court order blocking him from continuing to do so. An interesting case here is I don't doubt they can get a US court order, but getting it enforced in the UK has become a real issue with all kinds of content owners. They are asking for $150,000 in damages per event he has streamed, attorney and legal costs, and forfeiture of any revenue he has garnered from streaming such events. Ariane Celeste, who will be on the cover of the November Playboy, is recording a song that will be released at the end of the year, that UFC will help promote and market. Cole Miller had surgery on October 7 stemming from his 9-15 win over Ross Pearson. When he got punched in the face, the blow caused a vein in an artery in the side of his head to fuse, which would have made another blow in the region very dangerous. Rory MacDonald had to pull out of the 11:20 show in Detroit due to a knee injury, and Brian Foster will take his place against Matt Brown, which is on the Spike hour before the pay-per-view. The debut of Pascal Kraus, on the prelims of the 11:13 show in Oberhausen, Germany, looks to be against UK fighter Mark Scanlon. That isn't confirmed, but Kraus' original opponent, Kenny Robertson, suffered a broken toe in training and pulled himself off the show. Mac Danzig vs. Joe Stevenson in a battle of former TUF winners has been added to the 12:11 show in Montreal. Danzig has lost 4 of his last 5 fights, and a loss here would make it likely he'll become only the 3rd TUF winner, after Travis Lutter and Efren Escudero, to be cut. Strikeforce. The first Paul Heyman video that he shot a few weeks ago in San Jose was released, with Nick Diaz. In an interview promoting the release, Heyman said he was close to making a deal with TNA, it fell through, and he's now formed a production company, Looking for Larry, and the EA Sports MMA game videos are his first client. He was saying when the first videos were released that he's done with wrestling. My sense was always he looked at being done with wrestling in 2006 when he quit WWE. Although he did follow it pretty closely and did come up with a long-term battle plan for TNA before the deal fell through. Currently their idea of a reality show is a promotion on Sherdog.com called Sherdog MMA Fighting Exchange. This mirrors the MMA career mode in the EA Sports video game, and it's a promotion for the game, as well as something of their own NXT on the internet, except taken more seriously. They pair 4 young fighters with 4 Strikeforce stars. Instead of doing stupid challenges, they take them all over the world to train, as all the fighters will have time in various US gyms, as well as go on trips to Brazil and Japan. The coaches are Luke Rockhold, who they are trying to groom to be a top star, Jason Miller, Shagar Musasi and Ronaldo Hakare Souza. They will go to gyms and be trained by people like Randy Couture, Boss Rutan, Rickson Gracie, and Pat Miletic, who are also characters in the video game. Antonio Silva vs. Valentijn Overeem, the older brother of Alistair Overeem, has been added to the 12/4 show in St. Louis. The deal here is just old-school booking. Strikeforce is trying to push the idea that they've got better heavyweights than the UFC. They want to do a bunch of mix-and-match heavyweight matches next year with Alistair Overeem, Fedor Emelianenko, Fabricio Verdum. The sad thing about Verdum is that in San Jose, the city he beat Fedor in, when he was introduced at the weekend show, it was as if nobody had even heard of him, and people didn't react to him like any kind of a star. Josh Barnett, Andrei Arlovsky, and Silva, with the idea that if Silva beats the champion's brother, which he should, then he'll be elevated into the top tier to fight the rest of the names. The one thing is that between Alistair Overeem, Fedor, Verdum, and Barnett, there are tons of questions as to where all of them stand today. Overeem looks impressive, but the reality is the only major heavyweight he's beaten was Brett Rogers, and people talk like he'd be the best because he's done well in K1, but that's a different sport. Fedor is the all-time greatest, but nobody knows where he stands today. Verdum beat Fedor, but still isn't a star, and he also has beaten Overeem in the past. Barnett was clearly among the best heavyweights in the world 5 years ago, and he hasn't lost in years, but hasn't fought anyone top tier either. Provided there are no serious injuries, the one thing is, people from this group are either going to prove their spot or get exposed over the next year because everyone on the list should have a few tough opponents in 2011. LeVar Johnson vs. Virgil Zwicker and a women's match with Shauna Olsen vs. Julia Budd, in her MMA debut. Budd holds a kickboxing win over Gina Carano years ago, were added to the 10/22 Challenger show in Fresno. WWE. In the first major poll taken after the first debate, the Rasmussen poll showed Richard Blumenthal expanding his lead over Linda McMahon to 54% to 43%. However, a week later, the Fox News poll cut Blumenthal's lead to 49% to 43%. That poll indicated the race was up for grabs because of both the 8% undecided, as well as 4% of the prospective McMahon voters and 5% of the prospective Blumenthal voters said they could change their mind. Both Pro Wrestling and Blumenthal's Vietnam comments were regarded as strong negatives for each candidate in that poll to about half the voters. The two had a second debate, in Norwalk, which was a lot nastier than the first, but also got very little coverage. In this one the two argued back and forth, with both often ignoring the questions asked. McMahon was asked if she supported the position of the National Federation of Independent Businesses, which endorsed her, regarding weakening the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the Family and Medical Leave Act. Blumenthal also had questions he didn't answer. Blumenthal said McMahon claims to be different, but that there's nothing different about a company that paid lobbyists to strong-arm Washington. Blumenthal went after WWE in ways both fair and perhaps unfair. He criticized them for having their merchandise manufactured overseas using cheaper labor, thus depriving Americans of jobs, following Blumenthal's profits before people line about Linda and the company. He also criticized them for lobbying Congress to oppose laws giving the FTC power to fine companies who market adult content entertainment to children. McMahon said the WWE's lobbying against the law is because they value free speech. That's a good one, given they're attempting to remove non-storyline-based signs at live shows and long-time policy of punishing wrestlers who complain publicly about anything. McMahon was said to have done better. Blumenthal directly confronted McMahon about the WWF tipping off Dr. George Zaorian about the federal investigation of him, and telling him to destroy all records involving WWF personnel. He also criticized her for the company's long-standing issues with steroids. McMahon didn't have comebacks, other than saying, "Mr. Blumenthal, I think you wanted to constantly focus on WWE because it's really difficult for you to focus on the economy and creating jobs. WWE is certainly a company of which I am very proud." With her trailing and now her odds of winning diminishing over the past week, there are a lot of questions to be asked after the election. No doubt the McMahons will blame the Connecticut print media, because far more came out about WWE, the key being that the independent contractors issue could cost the company greatly if it is ruled they have misclassified the wrestlers. They can't complain about the dirtiness of the campaign since Linda's campaign did far more negative campaigning, trying to win the election by constantly pushing that Blumenthal lied on the Vietnam issue. After the first debate ended, the McMahon campaign took out advertising all over the internet saying Linda wins debate, even though the public reaction, based on the change in poll numbers, was not favorable to her. Blumenthal took out new TV ads that accused McMahon of having lobbyists to help her duck taxes, kill steroid and drug testing laws and avoid health and safety protections for its workers. Their claim is the WWF lobbied to change regulations and how events are taxed and lobbied against independent drug testing legislation. Well, in Florida in the early 90s, when there was a movement to have an athletic commission and that part of the commission's role would be to drug test wrestlers, the WWF did hire a highly paid lobbyist to get the bill killed. They did get deregulated in other states, but those states weren't going to implement drug testing. In some states, like Nevada, they no longer pay a percentage of the gate to the commission so they save on taxes. In other states, they still pay commission tax, but are no longer regulated by the commission. There has been a lot of media, and this stems from Michael Benoit, saying that by getting rid of regulation by commissions, WWE had nobody overseeing what they did and it led to more dangerous stunts in the ring and more serious injuries. That's overplaying the role of commissions, because the product in commission states and non-commission states was largely identical, other than some states didn't allow blood. In those states, WWE didn't have blood, or if it was a pay-per-view, paid whatever fine it was to have the blood, before they banned the blade. McMahon is now saying she will try to get non-defense spending of the government moved back to 2008 levels, freeze federal hiring, freeze federal wages and use money from the stimulus packages to pay down payments on the debt. She also said WWE programming would be better at depicting women than it had been in the past with the PG rating, when confronted with the famed Trish Stratus Sparks Like a Dog clip. She categorized her spending money to stop legislation against adult programming being marketed to young children by saying she a First Amendment rights proponent. Well, as long as it doesn't involve anything they aren't in control of. Christiane Amanpour on ABC's This Week showed some clips and said, "I'm a woman, you're a woman. What do you really think when you see some of that go on in the ring? The girl who was told to get on all fours, I think by your own husband, and bark like a dog." She defended it by saying WWE programming has changed and that she's happy with the content today. When asked if she would fight against those kind of depictions on television, she again brought up the First Amendment, and pressed, when asked, "So you don't think there's anything wrong with it?" She said people have the right to watch what they want to watch, and then said, "At WWE, women really are powerful women." The final debate was on October 12 in New London and both heavily attacked the other. As far as who won went, Linda was more aggressive, constantly going after him by acting like he knew nothing about creating jobs. He got real aggressive regarding her record in WWE, and she tried to say he's changing the subject, as the election is about creating jobs, which he knows nothing about, not about WWE. Based on a number of different reporters, it was a split decision for Blumenthal, but that doesn't mean the voters will take it that way. But they said McMahon didn't come off well trying to divert the subject from wrestling, and if she loses the election, her wrestling baggage will be a key reason. Blumenthal said McMahon had spent hundreds of millions of dollars, totally incorrect. The number would be just over $1 million, lobbying against legislation that would have drug-tested wrestlers and which would have banned marketing adult content to children. He then brought up that 7 former WWE wrestlers have died since her campaign started. McMahon said that the deaths had nothing to do with ring performance, which is very much debatable if deaths come from painkillers used to combat ring injuries. She tried to score points by saying that by coming down on wrestling, you insult the wrestling fan audience. You can always change the channel. It's insulting to the millions of people who watch WWE each week or who are entertained by it to suggest that it is less than quality entertainment. But that's a poor defense of the content issues raised, and even worse defense when real-life deaths are brought up. McMahon again pushed Blumenthal lied about Vietnam and claimed the people of Connecticut know you. What they know now is you have great difficulty telling the truth. It was clear both have grown to truly dislike the other, and unlike candidates who do but pretend to be civil, this has gotten to where it's a strong personal issue. But as he pushed wrestling, she became defensive. When he got on her about WWE having all their merchandise made overseas, she said she'd love to have it made in America but doesn't think the proper infrastructure is in place. When she talked about creating jobs, he said she'd have more credibility if she didn't lay off 10% of her workforce last year after her company took tax credits designed to create new jobs, and a year she took home $46 million. Well, Vince did in stock dividends. She would have more credit on outsourcing if her company didn't buy most of its merchandise in China and Pakistan, abroad, and if most of her company's hats and t-shirts were not made abroad. What also was bad for her is a question asked of her which asked if she felt WWE programming was degrading to women. She said she's proud of the company, and said it was a soap opera, saying there were times they pushed the envelope but that's no longer the case. An email question said, "You seem to have amassed a fortune in a very sleazy business." This allowed Blumenthal to say he's fought to protect children from abuse, while McMahon not only marketed sex and violence to young WWE fans, but hired lobbyists in Washington to fight efforts to curtail such entertainment. When she talked about the company's wellness policy, he went on the attack again, saying, "I can't believe I just heard Ms. McMahon brag about this wellness policy at WWE. She requires all wrestlers to sign a death clause that absolves WWE from all responsibility if wrestlers are killed in the ring and the company is at fault, absolves her company of all responsibility. That wellness policy is not working too well. There have been 7 dead wrestlers since she started campaigning for this office. I would suggest some other policy might be advisable." In a sense, a cheap shot, of the former WWE wrestlers who passed away, 8 since the campaign started, only 2, Lance Cade and Umaga, were in the company during the period of the wellness policy. Granted, circumstances of both deaths, like all the drugs and steroids Chris Benoit were using, considering the policy, open up a ton of questions. But the other deaths can't be blamed on a weak current policy, although he could bring up the lack of a policy for years in a company that had a high death rate. The Hartford Courant reported that a beaming Blumenthal talked with reporters after the debate, while unlike after the first 2 debates, McMahon left the building without talking with reporters. The New York Post endorsed McMahon, both calling Blumenthal a proven liar and pushed her line in her TV commercials about, "If he's lying about Vietnam, what else is he lying about?" They said she's for fiscal responsibility, which is needed in these economic times, and ripped on Blumenthal for saying the economy isn't in bad shape. What is interesting about the endorsement is the longtime feud between the McMahons and Phil Mushnick, the well-known Post sports columnist. In the early 90s, the McMahons sued the newspaper, which actually broke many of the stories that were used by the Democrats during the campaign. The suit was later dropped after Vince was indicted on the conspiracy to traffic steroids charge that he was acquitted on. McMahon being endorsed by the Post isn't a surprise, since they usually lean Republican. Actor Freddie Prinze Jr. was rehired by WWE as a producer and director. He had a brief run as part of the writing team in 2009. The story we got is that Prinze Jr. got back in touch with the company in August and said he was interested in working there again. but didn't want to travel to Stamford. He's going to be at a lot of the television shoots involved with backstage pre-tapes, on-site vignettes, and will be involved in a lot of the creative meetings, but via conference call from Los Angeles. He'll fly in for a lot of the television shoots, but not all. He was generally well liked by everyone in creative when he was there. An update on Patrick Henry, the older brother of Mark Henry, who at last word was in a medically induced coma following a stroke on October 3. Henry has since had several surgeries to stop the bleeding and pressure on his brain caused by the stroke. Henry, 41, was an all-state football player and a star as part of the Texas A&M Wrecking Crew defense from 1988 to 1991. At press time they had taken him off the medication that was keeping him in a coma and he was expected to be revived on October 14. Henry, who has a master's degree, was a full-time student working on getting a teaching credential, and has 5-month-old twins. Great Khali is back in India as part of the cast on the India reality TV show Bigg Boss House, which is a takeoff on Big Brother. Notes from the 10th SmackDown TV show by Brian Alvarez. The best and worst of WWE on this show. It opened with Long introducing Edge as SmackDown's newest acquisition. I wrote weeks ago that WWE could have made bragging rights mean something by putting something tangible on the line, like the draft pick of a big star. Could have been Edge here, for example, if Team SmackDown won. Could have been Punk had Raw won. Nope. They just switched shows. Jack Swagger and his mascot, the Swagger Soaring Eagle, came out and cut a promo on Edge for injuring the eagle, and endangered species, last week. Edge's gimmick is that he wants to destroy everything in WWE that is stupid. He should destroy his own storyline if that's the case. All they're doing is telling you that there's a lot of stupid stuff in WWE, and since it's his deal to destroy it he's in one stupid segment after another. They had a match, here for free with no build. If you take out the stuff with the eagle it was a really great TV match which Edge won clean with the spear. So they started and blew off the feud Edge's first night in. Cody told us to brush our teeth. Layla pinned Kelly in a match with a lot of screaming from both girls. Then we had the stupidest segment. Big Show came out to talk about his team at Bragging Rights. You know, his team for the main event of a pay-per-view that needs all the help it can get. It was all bad comedy. He said they needed a mascot, so Hornswoggle came out dressed as a Viking since the show is in Minnesota. The Vikings are playing head-to-head. The Dude Busters came out and said they wanted to be on Team SmackDown, and when Show said no they revealed Raw shirts. So Show chokeslammed them both at the same time. I think WWE is attempting to see whether if they do the worst build for a pay-per-view they possibly can if it'll still beat Bound for Glory. Rhodes and McIntyre beat Cavill and Kingston. Cavill is the latest guy to do a losing gimmick. Match was good while it lasted before Rhodes pinned Cavill with the Crossroads. Well, they're certainly proving Cavill can't get over. Michael Cole was infuriating during this match. He explained that Cavill and Kingston were a team because they met each other at a GameStop, bought a game and played it for 3 hours together. He then started burying them for being video game geeks. Keep in mind the only reason Bragging Rights exists after bombing last year is because it's designed to sell, yes, the WWE video game. Vince must have figured this out because Cole buried video game geeks for a while, then got very quiet for a moment, then started seriously calling the match. Kane did another wacky promo. Not only did he have the goofy 50s outer space music, but it hit a crescendo whenever he had a point to make. In other words, they must have a live band playing this in the back or something. Paul Bearer is so unlike anyone else in this roster full of carbon copy cutouts that he actually makes these segments worthwhile. I mean, there is nobody like him in WWE in 2010. Not even close. Kane said his feud with Undertaker was just warming up. Ziggler beat MVP. Caitlyn helped Ziggler win and then they hugged. Vicky saw this and flipped out. Ziggler told her that Caitlyn was nothing to him and he only loved Vicky. This storyline strains credulity. The great Alberto Del Rio, should be his new ring name, did a promo talking about how he was going to bury Mysterio in the main event. And then they had a great match. I love this. Mysterio hit the ring and went right after Del Rio, since this was, of course, a grudge match where locking up would be foolish. He beat the piss out of him all over ringside for a long time. He finally went up top and Del Rio hit him with an awesome run up the ropes Enzuigiri for the heat. Place was totally into it. Del Rio tried his Enzuigiri again but missed. Mysterio gave him a top rope Hurricane Rana and Del Rio took this wild bump, leaping into 619 position. However, as Mysterio went for the move, Ricardo Rodriguez tripped him. Rodriguez got up on the apron. Mysterio gave Del Rio a spinning head scissors, Del Rio bonked into Rodriguez and fell into 619 position. Mysterio hit the move and then followed it up with a springboard splash for the pin. Excellent match. It was quite the deal, though, to see WWE giving away two awesome matches for free on TV and then trying to use goofy comedy to sell a pay-per-view match. A story that I'd never heard before was mentioned by Mick Foley regarding the beginning of the completely scripted interviews aspect of WWE television. He said that it actually stemmed from the This Is Your Life, Rock segment that was one of the higher-rated segments in the history of wrestling on cable television. It has been written up so many times that it's the all-time record holder, but it's actually not the case. The all-time record-setting segment was a Steve Austin vs. Undertaker title match that did a 9.5 quarter. He noted that the segment was scheduled for 14 minutes and ended up going 26 minutes, and at that point, because TV is live, they felt they needed more rigid adherence to time cues, and to do that, you can't have people out there doing interviews on the fly. The funny thing is, by going long, they ended up with an increased rating for the show. That wasn't the first time, as Raws often had late matches cancelled or cut down in time because the early segments went long. But even with scripting, that happens all the time. It maybe doesn't have as frequently as in the past. Pro wrestling TV shows have been done live for years the old way, but it did require changes to fit time as the show went on, and I guess right now they simply want things more controlled. When WWE purchased the Awa tape library in 2003 from the Gagne family, it was for a price of $3 million. Big Show is getting a big push right now, partially because his movie is about to come out. Boy, is that movie going to die at the box office. The WWE Top 50 Superstars of All Time DVD cover was released. If you recall, there was a list of wrestlers, and I'm not even sure where it came from, that was submitted many months ago. I was only told at the time that the list was a complete embarrassment and it showed people who clearly had no knowledge of wrestling at all. I don't know if it was or wasn't changed. But as far as people on the cover, so you know they made the list, you had The Rock, Eddie Guerrero, Pat Patterson, Show, Mysterio, Edge, Lawler, Michaels, Monsoon, Cena, Jimmy Snuka, Dusty Rhodes, Jake Roberts, Moolah, Terry Funk, Kurt Hennig, Junkyard Dog, Triple H, Roddy Piper, Ricky Steamboat, Ted DiBiase, Randy Orton, Sergeant Slaughter, Undertaker, Kane, Iron Sheik, and Austin. Since we don't know the other 23, I can't really comment on it, although clearly some huge names are not going to be there. Plus, if you have a greatest of all time video, to me, for modern fans, the musts on the cover are Hogan, Flair, Austin, Michaels, Triple H, Undertaker, Bret Hart, Rock, and maybe Randy Savage. I could see Andre, but he's been dead for 17 years, and I'm not saying people have forgotten about him, because the name is well known, but it's not nearly as big as it was years back, as the Andre audience has long since moved on. It's almost cutting off your sales to spite your face to not have Hogan, Flair, and Hart on the cover. I was told they were going to rank them 1 through 50, and there's no way to do that without making everyone mad, particularly since number 1 would have to be either Hogan, Austin, or Flair, depending on what criteria you want to use, and even Triple H and Michaels declared Flair the greatest of all time numerous times, but I can't see them giving him number 1 if he's not even on the cover. They may go with Michaels, who is at least an excellent in-ring performer, because I honestly just can't see the gall of picking Triple H, and while Undertaker could be a compromise because he's kind of the number 1 guy in the dressing room in some ways, in no way can you make a case for either he or Triple H as the number 1 guy in the history of the business. Patterson was an excellent worker, but he was best known as the junior partner of the 60s best tag team, and Ray Stevens has to come before him under any standard, and I would think Patterson would be the first to say so. Then again, for cover art, nobody would know him. Show, Edge, Monsoon, Roberts, Moolah, Hennig, Chad, Kane, and Iron Sheik, even with the expected WWE mindset, have no business in a top 50 of all time even as a stretch. Slaughter was a great worker with a great gimmick, but only for a few years, and while he's a legit Hall of Fame candidate, as top 50 of all time, it's difficult. The only names I'd have even thought they'd maybe put on was Hennig, because a lot of the modern wrestlers grew up with him, so he's special to them, and maybe Edge toward the bottom because he's on the current roster. Actually, DiBiase was also a great worker with a great gimmick, but it would be real hard to say he was top 50 of all time, although in a list that is going to be 80% post 1984, then he'd probably be on it. Because of their family relationship, Patterson, Monsoon, and Moolah, while the latter two being ridiculous picks as wrestlers, if it was the McMahon family's top 50 friends is another subject, I actually would have expected them. A note regarding the Jim Ross Hart situation: Inserting a stent in one's heart is not a surgical procedure. It is done using a catheter inserted through the femoral artery and is threaded all the way up to the arteries that feed the heart muscle. A surgeon would be on standby in case something goes wrong. The recovery from such a procedure is not that difficult other than you need a few days of rest. Probably due to Undertaker's condition, on the November UK tour, the Kane vs Undertaker matches have added show and been made 3 ways. Regarding SmackDown vs Raw 2011, here's what they are look at in terms of cover art. For the US, Australia, Japan, and Asia Pacific, it will be Cena, Miz, and Show. Europe will be Orton, Sheamus, and Undertaker. There will also be 3 special European editions, the Viper Edition, the Lord of Darkness Edition and the Hitman Edition. Canada, as mentioned before, has Bret Hart, Edge, and Undertaker. The competitive window during the release period is going to be very difficult, as it comes out at the same time as the EA Sports MMA game, AAA, NBA 2011, FIFA 11, Pro Evolution Soccer 11, Fable 2, Fallout New Vegas, Star Wars Force Unleashed 2, Medal of Honor, The Fight, Rock Band 3 and only a few weeks before the new Call of Duty. However, they are predicting beating the 2010 numbers, based on website response being way up from last year and Facebook fans being up, and the first review of the product, getting an 88% rating of the German version of GamePro magazine, called it the best WWE game to date. The debut of SmackDown on Sci-Fi saw the rating down 18% from the My Network season average of 2.13, males 18 to 49 was down 15%, 1.44 to 1.23, so it actually does considerably less in that demo than Ultimate Fighter. Women 18 to 49 was down from 0.82 to 0.55, or a 33% drop and total viewers down 19%. On My Network, the show did 64% men and on Sci-Fi it did 69% men. The plan is for Pee Wee Herman to do a Pee Wee's Playhouse gimmick in backstage skits on the 11/1 show in Nashville. As of this past week, names that were in discussion regarding the Hall of Fame were Ron Simmons, Lex Luger, and Bill Goldberg. They want to do the Four Horsemen as a group as opposed to just Arnold Anderson, so that would include J.J. Dillon, since he and Vince McMahon have put their past behind them, and whoever else they want to consider, obviously not Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Sid Vicious or Paul Roma. But that would only be the case if Flair isn't signed to a new TNA deal after this year, and I don't see TNA not signing Flair. They also want Sting, but again that depends on Sting not signing with TNA for next year. Ziggler did an interview with the Poughkeepsie Journal and noted he's been a WWF fan since the age of 5, and went to his first show at 14 or 15 and at that point decided he wanted to be a pro wrestler. That's accurate, because in high school, he was friends with Gray Maynard of UFC, and Maynard told me about Nick Nemeth, Ziggler, and Mike Toller, an Ohio independent wrestler who was also on their high school wrestling team, hung around and how Nemeth and Toller always talked about wanting to become pro wrestlers while he talked about wanting to wrestle in the Olympics. All 3 were top-notch high school wrestlers, with Maynard a national champion and Nemeth I think was a state champion. To no surprise, Nemeth was a big Curt Hennig fan at the time, which isn't hard to tell. He said he likes the pairing with Vicky Guerrero because nobody gets booed like Guerrero. One insider noted to me that he's talked to 4 different WWE stars in recent weeks who have all said they've lost their passion for wrestling with the current product and that once their contract is up, they wouldn't want to renew it and wouldn't want to even stay in wrestling. We'll see, because people like that in the end rarely walk away unless they have a place to end up. A 5th person I'm aware of, who does have a place to end up and would want to stay in wrestling, is talking like it's a sure thing he's not going to renew his contract when it's up. But given the money he can make in WWE versus everywhere else, I don't want to say I'm skeptical because this person can make good money elsewhere, but we'll see. Another person not on this list, Edge, has been telling people that he's maybe 2 years away from retirement, when his contract expires, but you know how that goes. Still, Batista, Michaels and Jericho all walked away in recent months, and Jeff Hardy did as well, so the days when nobody leaves on their own are pretty much over. In Seattle, they have already started promoting next year's Over the Limit pay-per-view set for 5/22 at the Key Arena. An interesting trivia note about Team Raw and Team SmackDown this year on bragging rights. Right now, of the 13 people announced for the match, the number who were on their team last year is 0. It may end up being 1, because Henry, who was on Team Raw last year, was originally set for Team Raw. Of the 14 people last year, 7 have switched brands, 4 of whom are in this match with their new brand. 2 have left the company, Jericho and Michaels, 1 was retired by the company, Finlay, 1 is injured, HHH, one is in outer space, Matt Hardy, and one is on the same brand but not in the match, Kane. Del Rio was all over the media as a big darling when they returned to Mexico this past week with him as a star. Some who knew him busted his balls saying how when he left, he told everyone he wouldn't go to FCW and would go straight to the main roster. Del Rio came up with a Hogan-esque story, claiming he had an Achilles tendon injury and was out of action for a long time and that he asked to go to FCW to get back in shape before starting on TV. He said how he would be the biggest Latino star in a few years. He said his big mistake when he first got to WWE is that he was thinking about wrestling and being a good wrestler, but it's about being an entertainer, not being a great wrestler. Statsman Chris Harrington ran through all the WWE house shows from 2000 to 2009, or for the decade. This is not from a complete listing of matches, although working from a representative list, so the order may not be perfect, but it's pretty close, and the top 10 wrestlers who worked the most main event matches were Triple H, Cena, Batista, Edge, Orton, Angle, Undertaker, Show, Jericho, and Kane. Most main events by the year were 2000, The Rock, 2001, Austin, 2002, Angle, 2003, Lesnar, 2004, Benoit, 2005, Batista, 2006, Cena. Also Cena in 2006 had the most of any wrestler in any year during the decade. 2007, Batista, 2008, Triple H, 2009, Cena. Stryker and MVP were on CNBC last week pushing the WrestleMania reading challenge. During the interview, the hosts went after Stryker, saying how can you get on your moral high horse to tell people the importance of education when you are a teacher and would call in sick or make up excuses like a family illness to miss days to wrestle. He said he told his students at the time that some may deem his calling in sick as wrong, but that he was following his dreams. Hopefully his students were able to figure out that's a pretty lame excuse. It is funny that the guy got his job in WWE because of all the bad publicity he got in the New York papers about being a teacher who lied about family illnesses to take days off to do indie dates, and WWE thought bringing him in would make him a big baby face. Some background on Barrett from an article in the Lancashire Telegraph. When he was a kid, he had a big poster of Davey Boy Smith on his wall, and Smith was his favorite wrestler growing up. He was born in Penworth and lived in Preston until he was 6, and then moved to Wales at that age. He said all his friends grew out of wrestling but he stayed watching, and decided at 20 to become a wrestler. In 2007, when WWE was looking at recruiting British wrestlers, they called a group that were recommended for a tryout that included Sheamus, himself and McIntyre, and likely all were chosen because they were tall. He said Wade Barrett was named after a rugby player, Wade Dooley, so evidently he came up with the name rather than creative. Barrett may have gotten his last name from an old pro wrestler, Pat Barrett, an Irish wrestler who was a WWF Tag Team Champion in the 70s. He said the character itself was created while in developmental with help from Dusty Rhodes. He said working with Bret Hart at SummerSlam was a huge moment for him, because Hart was one of his favorites growing up. He said another highlight was being allowed to kick out of the Attitude Adjustment at the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. He said he's curious if he'll get cheered or booed when they run in the UK in November. Here's a note on the booking of Evan Bourne. On June 20th, he pinned Jericho in a pay-per-view match coming off his Cena endorsement angle on Raw, designed to turn him into a top star. Since that time, in 4 months, before going down with an injury, he scored exactly one victory on Raw, on the 7/5 show where he and Orton beat Jericho and Edge, when he pinned Jericho, but Orton then laid him out with an RKO. So even in his one win, he was left laying. His record after the Jericho win, which in hindsight makes 0 sense, was to lose to Jericho, win in an 8-man tag and get laid out, score a pin and get laid out in a run-in, and then follow with a run of 7 straight losses mixed in with 5 shows that he didn't even appear on. Lawler was at the New York Comic Con this weekend signing Headlocked, the comic book novel about wrestling that he was the cover artist for. He wasn't shy about his opinions, saying he said he hoped they bring back JR at least to work with him on the pay-per-view shows. He was not shy when Stryker's name was brought up. Don't have the exact quote, but Idiot would be part of it. Melina was mad about them dropping the Women's Championship. I don't see this as any kind of an issue, but apparently in the title history, the women's title they date back to 1956 with Moolah winning the tournament in Baltimore is gone, and they are tracing the history of the current belt to the Divas title, which I guess the belt will still be called. When talking about the title history that dates back to Moolah, she said, "From fabulous Moolah to this year, so many incredible women who are true champions, Hall of Famers. Pioneers held that title. When I looked at that page, Title History, it was an incredible honor to see my name up there with all of them. People who I am a fan of and have memories watching when I was younger. I held that title and was always picturing all these women holding the same title. It was a dream come true knowing my heroes touched the championship too. Now it's gone. What a shame. Someone who watched a video of the first season of Tough Enough noted some things ironic looking back, including cast members joking about hitting their heads and having trouble thinking, and the members of the cast passing around pain pills like candy. The latest cool new name in FCW is an African American named Marcus Owens, Marcus Allen and Terrell Owens. Exact numbers for 2 WWE shows on an August overseas tour were 8-1 in Melbourne, Australia, doing $11,245 and $927,364.08, and Auckland did $4,468 and $238,644. For the 924 and 925 shows in Paris, when it comes to paid attendance, the numbers were 14,726 per night, which was a sellout. 15,800 would be the total in the buildings each night, and the gates each night were $1,053,012 US based on the current conversion rate. The 9/14 SmackDown taping in Detroit drew only 5,059, paying $201,690, 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 paying